welcome back to ABA Exam Review and the continuation of our BCBA Practice Exam series. We're going through the next set of questions together. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. You're preparing to move, so your wife begins consolidating all your silverware and other utensils into one drawer. This is not the drawer that you've used for the last 3 years, so you still open the original drawer first before opening the new drawer. Opening the original drawer could be described as what? So the behavior we're looking at, always identify that first, is opening the original drawer. Why is that important? Well, your wife has moved all your silverware into one drawer, and it is not the drawer you've used for the last 3 years. So if you think about this behaviorally, when do you get reinforcement? Well, for 3 years, you're receiving reinforcement when you open that original drawer. Now, think about learning history. The longer a behavior is reinforced, as far as time goes, the stronger that behavior becomes and the harder it is to get rid of that behavior. And so, one of the things about a behavior that's been reinforced a long time is it's more difficult to put on extinction because that reinforcement history is strong. In this case, now when you open the original drawer, you don't get reinforcement, and yet you're still doing it. Why? A, extinction. We're looking at the act of opening the original drawer. So be careful because we're not looking at the consequence. We're looking at the response. Very important. That's why we're so specific in identifying that response. Opening the original drawer is an extinction. It's being put on extinction. Opening the original drawer is resistance to extinction because that behavior, although it's being put on extinction, is resistant to that extinction effect. Probably because it's been reinforced for so long. It's not spontaneous recovery. Spontaneous recovery happens after extinction has already been effective, same as resurgence. So spontaneous recovery and resurgence come post extinction. We're looking at opening the original drawer, which is a behavior that is occurring because your behavior is resistant to extinction. Be very careful. Extinction is the consequence. Resistance to extinction is what we would describe your behavior as, given the fact you've been opening the original drawer for so long. Polly performs a reinforcer assessment for Julie and determines that Julie is reinforced by makeup and Barbie dolls. Polly now uses makeup and Barbie dolls as consequences for Julie answering questions correctly. These consequences will select which of the following answer choices. Now, what do we mean by consequences will select? Well, when we think in very technical terms, which we should for the exam, when we talk about consequences, we talk about consequences selecting behavior. And specifically, consequences change the occurrence of behavior in the future. And so when we have a consequence, let's just say reinforcers. So Polly has these makeup and Barbie dolls, and those are the reinforcers for Julie. Those consequences aren't only going to select a single response. They select a response class B. And why is that? Well, because responses are always changing topographically. Whether it's slightly or significantly, each response is going to be a little different than the last. So if consequences only selected a single response of the same topography, it'd be very, very difficult to reinforce that single response. Julie may not answer the same question the same way each time, and we still want to give Julie reinforcement and reinforce the response. So we're not necessarily selecting the single response, we're selecting the response class as a whole. Consequences don't select the stimulus class, obviously, because consequences are stimulus that follow the response. They don't select a behavior class. They select a B response class. If you don't understand that, just think about how difficult it would be if only a single response with a single topography was reinforced. It would be so difficult to get that exact topography each time. It'd be nearly impossible. That is why consequences actually select a response class rather than a single response. A client starts receiving ABA services funded through an insurance policy. The supervising analyst develops a good relationship with the client and wants to help him get better at Monopoly, even though the client only ever plays Monopoly while with the analyst. What rule is the analyst violating? What has the analyst done wrong here? They have a good relationship with the client and they're helping him get better at Monopoly, but the client only plays Monopoly with the analyst. Meaning, is that client ever going to get reinforced for the behavior of Monopoly outside of this environment? Probably not. So the rule that violates is A, the relevance of behavior rule. That says we should work on behavior that is likely to receive reinforcement outside of this environment in the natural environment. If this client never plays Monopoly anywhere else, then it might not be the greatest skill to work on. Could it be a reinforcer? Maybe. But as far as a skill goes, this is almost another way to say is it socially valid, except it's more specific to reinforcement. It's not the fair pair rule. The fair pair rule says if you remove or decrease a behavior, you've got to replace that behavior with something else that's hopefully functionally equivalent. It's not rule governed behavior. There's no rules in place here. And it isn't the pre-met principle because the analyst is not establishing any sort of contingency. What the analyst is doing is teaching and developing these monopoly skills, even though it's very unlikely those skills ever receive reinforcement out of this teaching environment. So what rule is the analyst violating? What's the relevance of behavior rule? Mr. Jennings wants to teach his students to comprehend the passages more accurately and to read more fluently. He takes baseline data and then begins a new condition where he starts an intervention to work on reading fluency. Following the intervention, he ends the intervention and begins the accuracy intervention, which produces drastically better results compared to baseline. Based on this information, what likely occurred leading to the drastic improvement from baseline? That's a lot to think about, a lot in that question. So we want to slow down and really understand what we're looking at here. So we're considering the idea of why was there a drastic improvement from baseline? Because the accuracy intervention was way better than baseline. So if we just break it down like this, and let's say that's our baseline, and then let's say this is our fluency, something like that, and then let's say accuracy was way up here. Here's our different conditions, right? And so he took baseline and then he taught them to read fluently. After fluency, though, then he teaches them to read accurately. Well, what is likely to happen if they got better at reading and they were more fluent? Well, there's a pretty good chance that that may increase the accuracy, which is why order matters. So why or what likely occurred leading to that drastic improvement from baseline? A, there was a confounding variable. Well, it probably wasn't a confound given he's controlling the intervention. So he's still controlling as much as he can. That intervention isn't necessarily the confound here. What about the kids learn from an outside source? Well, we don't have any proof of an outside source or indication. What likely happened was a sequence effect. Given the order of interventions, this intervention here affected this intervention given it came before it. Simply the order affected it. And that's typical in academic research or academic work where you can't, it's hard to unlearn or forget what you learned. So if they became more fluent, then that fluency may have translated to a more accurate student. So it's likely there was a sequence effect and the baseline was conducted improperly. Well, there's no indication baseline was wrong. It just what happened. He taught the learners or the readers to be more fluent. That fluency likely led to more accuracy. So based on this information, what likely occurred? Well, a sequence effect. Susie loves to draw with her sister after school. However, Susie's sister will sometimes try to draw on Susie's paper. Whenever Susie's sister tries to draw on Susie's paper, Susie will get up from the table and tell her, "I am done drawing with you," and exits the room. Susie's sister is now drawing on Susie's paper more than before. Susie getting up from the table and leaving is an example of what? So looking at Susie getting up from the table. Now let's look at that in the context of this question. Susie is drawing with her sister, but Susie's sister will sometimes draw on Susie's paper. When this happens, Susie's sister draws on Susie's paper. What happens? Susie gets up from the table and tells her, I am done drawing with you. Exit the room. So Susie getting up from the table is the consequence of Susie's sister's drawing on Susie's paper. But now Susie's sister continues to draw on that paper. So her behavior actually increased. So Susie getting up from the table and leaving is reinforcement. Now, is it positive or negative? Well, Susie is leaving. She's escaping this situation. And so escape is removal, which would make this negative. So Susie getting up from the table and leaving is a good example of B, negative reinforcement. It's obviously not positive or negative punishment because Susie's sister's behavior is maintaining or increasing. Susie's sister's behavior was reinforced or is reinforced by her sister getting up from the table and leaving. So Susie's getting up from the table and leaving is an example of negative reinforcement. A great self-management program consists of several steps. If you wanted to help your friend design a self-management program, what should the first step in that process consist of? Personnel management, self-management, client management. It's all very, very similar. When we are designing a program, what is the first thing we need to do? Very first thing we have to do, have to identify the purpose. What's the goal? Without a goal, we don't have measurement, we don't have procedures, we can't monitor, we can't adjust. We have to have that goal first and foremost. So if you want to help your friend design a self-management program, what is the first step you need? Well, A, identifying a goal for the behavior to be changed. Because you can't train on procedures without a goal. What procedures are you going to use? You can't monitor the behavior without a goal. What are you monitoring? And you can't contrive contingencies because what are you contriving contingencies for? So before you do anything else, you have to identify a goal for the behavior to be changed. Start to notice the similarities and patterns between client management, self-management, and personnel management. They're all very, very similar. All right, thank you for watching. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. Please subscribe on YouTube if you have not